Ladies and gentlemen, our closing keynote speaker has been a regular at the ALPA Air Safety Forum because of the collaborative and long-standing relationship our two organizations have maintained over the years. Mr. Rinaldi is the 6th president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association and has held the post since 2009. We were all happy to hear that Paul was just reelected this week to his 4th term. Don't know what that says about Paul's intelligence. Under Mr. Rinaldi's leadership, NACA has focused on improving its working relationship with both the FAA and the Department of Transportation. Evidence of this can be seen in the Air Traffic Control Safety Action Program, efforts to pursue fatigue mitigation, and the creation of both the professional standards and the Partnership for Safety. Each of these ventures has helped to advance a stronger safety culture while promoting a spirit of cooperation among aviation stakeholders. Prior to being elected president, Mr. Rinaldi served as NACA's executive vice president and also spent 18 years as a local air traffic controller in the tower at Washington Dulles International Airport. Mr. Rinaldi is a member of the Next Gen Advisory Committee and the FAA Management Advisory Council. In addition, he serves on the RTCA Policy Board and the Board of Advisors for the Eno Center for Transportation. Paul is a true friend of the airline pilots and of ALPA itself. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Paul Rinaldi to the stage.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you to the brothers and sisters of ALPA. Closing keynote speaker, huh? That means I'm before you and the bar. And the reception tonight, which I apologize, I planned on being there, but 2 of my board members need a little bit of babysitting, and I gotta figure that one out before it gets too far down the road. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I always clear the schedule to be here as much as I possibly can and listen to the discussion. That was a great panel that you guys had on there. We do something similar to that in Communicating for Safety, where we have the pilots and the controllers talking about real issues, because communication is key to enhancing the safety of the system. We are, ALPA and NACA we truly are brothers and sisters. You know, there's a Greek-Italian bond that they have, and the Italians, because of their common ancestry and culture and history in the Mediterranean nations, they say, the Italian word is straccia faccia, straccia razza, which means same face, same race. It's kind of the same thing with the controllers and the pilots, the front line operation of the world's largest, safest, most efficient aviation system in the world. Yes, I just got elected to my 4th term, and I'm not the only one questioning my intelligence at this point, especially after this brutal election cycle. I just don't get it, where truth means nothing anymore, and you could say anything and you have to defend the ridiculous, and you have to prove that you didn't do something so ridiculous. But nevertheless, maybe that's what unions are. We are so much alike, with highly trained, highly professional aviation safety professionals, that our #1 goal is to focus on the safety of the national airspace system. Yet inside our union, we just really decide to eat our own, chew us up, spit us out, push us aside, not realizing that focusing on the me, my, I issues really detracts from the collective and detracts from enhancing the safety of the system and actually making our profession safer and better. So we work in the ultimate team occupation. I mean, controllers, whether it's in their facilities, rely upon each other to get the job, the mission accomplished, and certainly pilots within your cockpit rely on teamwork there also to get the mission accomplished. Yet so much time is spent focused on the individual, when we all know it is about all of us collectively working together to enhance the safety of the system and make it absolutely the best it could possibly be. But I guess maybe that's just unions. I don't know. Maybe all unions do that. You know, as operators, the frontline operators, controllers, pilots, like I said, the ultimate teammate or team occupation. But on the frequency, we are the ultimate teammates. You need to tell us what you're experiencing, we need to tell you what we can do and can't do and what might be out there. And perfect examples were some of that wake turbulence discussion that we just heard. And the environment is ever changing up there. And we all know that, you know, mistakes in flight are all too often unforgiven. So we have to be on our A game all the time, both of us working together to get the mission accomplished for sure. ALPA and NACA at the national level is 100% on the same page on just about every issue. And we've accomplished some great things as these two great unions and running the largest, safest, most efficient airspace system in the world. We truly have a great partnership. I work with Tim really closely on the Next Gen Advisory Committee and the AFL-CIO Executive Council. You want to see infighting? Come to one of those meetings. Those are real interesting. So whether it's the burning issues that you have of the 1,500-hour rule, the single piloted cockpit Norwegian Air scheme, yes, I say scheme, secondary barriers, or whatever your top issues are, we are 100% behind you, and we go to the hill in full force. And Tim and I always talk, if the controllers and the pilots are for it in the operation, it's really a hard argument to go against us. But they still try to do that, but we work together. And the amazing work we do in choreographing roughly 8,000 aircraft in the sky at any given time in the most complex, most diverse airspace system in the world. And very rarely does a passenger, the millions of passengers that get to their destination safely every day, do they even think about what is going on up there, because they know the professionalism of the pilots and the controllers get the job done day in and day out. And that's us working together, the ultimate team on that frequency, speaking and communicating and understanding what we need to do. And we have been very, very good together. Over the last 8 years, commercial aviation has never been safer. However, now is not the time for complacency, and now is certainly not the time to rest on our accomplishments of the past. Now is not the time to say our system is good enough. As an aviation system, we have to continue to strive to be better, learn from each other, continue to work together, continue to work on modernization. Good enough. If we sit back and say good enough, that will be the demise of greatness. And this national airspace system deserves to be the best, the greatest it could possibly be, because that's what our passengers and that's what our professionals deserve. You know, the status quo, well, we have so many challenges in front of us. These problems are not easily resolved. And the status quo is, unfortunately, not acceptable. Increased traffic that we're seeing, the demand for growth, UAVs entering into our airspace, and I know there's reports every day that pilots are seeing them in flight, during departure, and during critical stages of flight on arrival. Commercial space, you had a big seminar on commercial space and how that impacts and will delay commercial aviation if we don't figure out a way to streamline the hundreds of thousands of miles of airspace we have to protect for in the event of a debris field. You know, and it's not even just going up now, they're re-entering. So it really is super challenging at this time. You know, and then all of this in front of us, and, you know, I hear about a pilot shortage, and we certainly have a controller shortage. And, you know, Tim has done an excellent job of educating me on the pilot shortage, and it's more of an economic shortage than it is a pilot shortage, and I do agree with him 100% on that. But what we have in front of us is a broken government system. And when I talk about a broken government system, I talk about Congress. They have to appropriate the FAA, the domestic agency that runs this aviation system, and they have to reauthorize them to set them rules so that we can continue to advance and modernize our system. And we have been living off short-term extensions and threats of shutdowns for the last 10 years. 28 short-term extensions of FAA reauthorization is just unacceptable. And it looks like, although the Senate said they were going to take it up the last week in July, and then said they were going to take it up the first week in August, and now we're saying maybe sometime in September. And for those that have been in Washington, D.C., that just means we're looking for another extension because they really can't find a date on that. You just look at our funding in the last 15 months, and you can understand where the problem actually lies. If you go back to April 30th of 2017, the government was going to run out of money, and Congress seemed to get together and say, we just need a few more days, and they pushed it to May 5th of 2017. April 30th of 2017 to May 5th of 2017, a few more days. And then they figured something out for a few months, and they gave us to September 30th of 2017 to fund the government and to fund our aviation system. Then they gave us to December 8th because they couldn't figure anything else out, which then punted to December 22nd because they thought they had enough figured out, but they couldn't do it. And then they said, well, we're not going to deal with this over the holiday break, so January 19th, we'll work it out. January 19th comes and goes, and we experience a shutdown. Happened on a Friday night at midnight, and most government employees are saying, that's no big deal, it's the weekend, except for we run a very dynamic 24-hour day, 7-day a week, 365-day operation, and a shutdown impacts us tremendously. We went through the weekend, went through Monday to about Monday night when they were going to resolve their issues, and they thought they had a deal, and they punted to February 9th. Before they actually had the deal, the FAA was saying, we have to close the academy. We've had it open for a day, and we don't have the funding to do that, and we have to send the 180 students that are there, we need to send them home with no date of ever returning and putting their lives on hold also. So they punted to February 9th of this year, and then once again, they couldn't figure it out, and it was, I believe it was a Thursday night, and they experienced a shutdown, what they say, over a midnight shift. But again, the government doesn't really work from after 5 o'clock, so it's really not an issue, except it was for us again. It was about a 12-hour shutdown, and they finally figured out they were going to have a deal this March 23rd, we're going to have a deal, and they put a nice package together, and they sent it to the White House, and the president said, I'm not going to sign that. He says he's not going to sign it because it increases spending by $1 trillion more, and he wanted money for a wall, and I can go on with a lot of issues, but I'm not going to debate whether funding for the wall, more money for defense, immigration, gun control, Affordable Care Act, you name the issue, it's a very important issue, but it's not germane to running a safe, efficient aviation system, so it should not get in our way to advancing and modernizing and continuing to be the world leader in aviation. So we're now funded till September 30th. And the president has issued 3 statements this week alone that he will shut down the government. He wants he definitely wants money for the funding for the wall for sure, and he wants more money for defense. And we're approaching $22 trillion in debt, and he wants to cut domestic spending, domestic agency spending. Well, my brothers and sisters of ALPA, the FAA is a domestic agency. And if you're going to cut us, that means we're going to have to do less than what we're doing today. So what happens with all these shutdowns, threats of shutdowns, deadlines? What happens is, as we start approaching this, the FAA has to protect their budget, and they start pulling back on meetings of modernization, such as en route datacom, which we're working so hard to focus on, because we kind of have to match the training with the commercial pilots and the controllers at the same time, so that actually when we roll it out, everybody is trained properly on this system. And if the government threats to shut down or is going to shut down on September 30th, that training is going to slide, which then is going to incur extra expenses for the airlines and for us for additional training. All modernization, whatever it is, whether it's airspace, whether it's routes, whatever we're working on, wake turbulence recategorization, all of that comes to basically a complete halt until we actually see what the funding is and see if we can start it back up. So the stops and goes, all it continues to do is increase the cost of the things we're trying to do and delay the time. And I just went through 15 months. This has been going on for 10 years. And we're falling further and further behind the rest of the world because they're able to be dynamic and modernized in the system, in their system. Together, we moved nearly 965 million passengers on a commercial flight last year. That's a 5% increase from 2016, and we're looking to cross the 1 billion mark this year of passengers. Capacity is growing, and this do more with less doesn't work. We have to find a way to find stable, predictable funding for our aviation system, or they're going to do less, and we will have a smaller aviation system. The Aviation Trust Fund, which most of you are pretty commonly aware of, is the ticket taxes, the fuel taxes that go into the trust fund, brings in currently right now about $14.5 billion, maybe $15 billion a year this year if we cross that 1 billion passenger mark. That's enough to run this agency if there wasn't stops and goes. So if there was a way to take that trust fund and send it through the agency and continue the growth, it would give us the opportunity to not deal with the stop and go funding, but at the same time, it will give us the opportunity to continue to grow the operations, grow the agency, and grow the aviation system in this country. The new users, we have to figure out what they're going to pay. Because if they start with zero, it will always be zero, as we have learned. If commercial space pays nothing for blocking hundreds of thousands of miles of airspace for the launches and reentries, then they will pay nothing 30 years from now when they're doing it 3 or 4 times a day. Because that's what they're used to, and they're not going to increase their taxes. So brothers and sisters, the status quo of funding and FAA reauthorization is completely unacceptable. And as the frontline pilots and representing the safety of the system from the pilot's perspective, you have to understand that this is all of us together. Tim has been there 100% with us with FAA reform. I got gigged for saying I'm privatization Paul. I'm not privatization Paul, I'm aviation Paul. We should all be about the aviation system of this country. It's an economic engine, $1.5 trillion into our gross domestic product, almost 12 million jobs. All of us have done very well for ourselves in this aviation system. We should see it grow and prosper and have a new frontier, not do less because the appropriation process and the reauthorization process in Congress is 100% broken. Now, I am not saying give the FAA a blank check. I'm the first one to tell you that that would be a problem. But if you look at our facilities across the country, 20 en route centers, over 50 years old, already past their life cycle. Our towers are aging, our equipment is aging, and as technology is evolving so quickly, if today the FAA said we need to put the latest iPad into our facilities, which by the way, we don't have, but the latest iPad into our facilities so we have an information system, that process would take probably, because they wouldn't buy off the shelf because they can't, or they refuse to, I'm not really quite sure, Depends on who you ask. But that iPad, today's technology, would have to go through requirements, procedures, bidding. So we're 3 years on today's technology. Then testing at the tech center. Then with the human in the loop, the controllers get to touch it and go, that doesn't work, we need this, we need that. And they go, well, that wasn't in the contract, so we're either going to have to put more money into the contract or we're going to have less of a waterfall, meaning less facilities are going to get this new technology. And as time keeps ticking on and they do the waterfall, you're implementing 15 years later technology thinking it's the new greatest thing. That's what we're dealing with now. And airlines are frustrated with the way the FAA is implementing because they're putting equipment on airplanes that they'll never use because 15, 20-year life cycle, and they never get to it because of the way they're implementing. So we have to change the FAA. We have to reform what we're doing, change the bureaucratic procurement requirement process. I'm not saying give them a blank check because we would have the same problem. There are good people in the FAA. Most of them are good people. But I think at the end of the day, I said most, that was good. At the end of the day, we have to break down those titanium silos that they just care about the one system and not focused on the impact of the operation on the day-to-day decisions they make. Now, I know you're probably frustrated with aviation medicine, as we are, for certificates, because their decisions are not made on how it impacts the operation. It's basically made on what they think aviation medicine should be. And we have the same thing, whether it's FAA, HR, labor relations, general counsel, finance. It's all focused on what they think is good government operation as opposed to what's good to run the safest, most efficient, most dynamic airspace system in the world. So there's got to be a way we can break that down. There's got to be a way that we can find a way to use that $15 billion and fund the system so it continues to flourish and grow so that we have and continue to enhance the safety of the system. I don't want to see less of an aviation system. I certainly don't want to have remote towers put everywhere that where controllers are working 5 or 6 towers remotely. I think it's a good technology, and it was talked about. That technology will enhance the safety of the system at Leesburg, Virginia, where there is no tower. And I don't know if you guys fly in and out of Leesburg with your private airplanes, but I tell you, all you got to do is watch it for about a half afternoon, and you go, you need some sense of order here. You certainly do. They're on the different frequencies, and it's a one runway. One's at 17, one's at 3.5, and they're looking at each other like, no, I got it, no, I got it, no, I got it. And it's kind of a standoff. It's very interesting what you see happening there. So there needs to be some type of semblance of order and control that goes on there. But, you know, the challenges ahead are so many, and it all starts with funding and structure. The FAA is having a symposium on wrong surface landings at, I guess, the third week in this month. Most of you probably already know, but it's an alarming rate that's happening. Now, most of it is GA, but the things that we would need to help those GA pilots, that equipment, is never, ever going to get to the facilities where we see this happening. So we have to figure out exactly how we're going to fix this. I mean, but a lot of it is commercial. We see at Boston and San Francisco. We see some repeat issues at Boston Tower and San Francisco Tower that we've got to do something more dynamic before the unthinkable happens. I mean, that one in Air Canada, San Francisco, scares everybody. It's just absolutely frightening. But how could that happen? Well, it could just happen because of just a lack of communication, a lack of understanding, and it seems to happen a couple of times, and we have to actually think outside the box on how to stop something like that from happening. But all too often, we get handcuffed by the bureaucratic process, the funding, and the reauthorization. Another good example, and maybe you could explain this to me, is, space-based ADS-B, satellites are up there, given real surveillance. Controllers can actually be able to get real surveillance instead of the tracking that we're using over the oceans. And the FAA, because they're hamstrung by money, can say, what we have is good enough. Now, I already talked, good enough is the enemy of great or the demise of great. But I don't know how you justify these two statements, and maybe you can help me out. The FAA spends roughly $3 billion on ground-based ADS-B because it's better than radar. They put a mandate out to everybody. By 2020, everybody will be ADS-B equipped because it's better than radar. But when it comes to space-based ADS-B, where we can have real surveillance over the oceans, we don't need that. The tracking is fine. It's basically the argument of, they're not saying it, but they're saying it, I don't have the money. That's unacceptable. Unacceptable what goes on in the oceans where we can't allow for deviations because we just don't have the proper tracks or the proper spacing. If we had real surveillance, we could give you proper information and certainly be able to get you out of some really bad turbulence. You can't be driven by the finances. This is a safety culture. This has to be safety first, and it has to be the operators that stand up together. You and I, standing up together, making Congress do the right thing, certainly making the FAA do the right thing, so that we can continue to enhance and grow aviation in this country. It's a pleasure to be here at your 64th Air Safety Forum, and I call for you to stand up for safety and have this airspace funded properly. Stable, predictable, reliable funding will get us across the finish line and continue to be the world leader in aviation. If we don't, we're going to lose more and more to our competitors. What the Canadians are doing to the north is impressive because they realized in the mid-90s they have to get out of the government process and be more dynamic and evolve with technology. So in closing, if the pilots and the controllers stick together by our guided principles, and as long as you aviate and navigate and communicate, and we inform and separate and communicate, we can accomplish anything. With the United States airspace system, we can be the best, continue to be the best in the world as long as we do it together. And I will tell you one thing. There's that saying that Harry Truman said, if you want a friend in Washington, D.C., get a dog, right? But I will tell you, NACA has a friend in ALPA, and ALPA has a friend in NACA, not just in Washington, D.C., but through our national airspace system. So thank you for your time today.
Woof, woof. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. So Paul's graciously offered to answer some questions for anyone who wants to ask the president a question about what he sees going on beyond his comments. And by the way, I want to just share, I share Paul's profound frustration with the way the funding system's been broken, with no fix in sight. No fix in sight. But Paul and I have been running into this brick wall for 4 years now. Yeah, and we're going to need the U.S. public to step up, and hopefully not before we have a complete breakdown of the system because it just isn't there. So questions? So I have two, Paul. I'll start with one, and I know we'll have others that come up. But so we had that interruption in the pipeline when the academy got shut down for a while, and that caused a, kind of like the rat and the snake. There was a gap in staffing. Could you just educate the group, first off, how long it takes from entrance to the academy before, let's say, you're a certified controller in New York Center? And then also, what does the staffing projection look like? Are we climbing out of the hole, or can we expect to be restrained?
So, great question. From zero knowledge going into the academy, going through the process en route takes roughly 3 to 5 years. It is just like it is in the cockpit. It is 100% almost an apprenticeship. There is a certified controller plugged in with a developmental, passing that skill on every day, hours after hours. And then once they get a position or two underneath their belt, they get some seasoning time, and then they go on to their next position, and classroom and maps and simulation. So through en route is a 3 to 5 year process. Now, terminal was built up to be something different. It was kind of for lack of a better analogy, it was a baseball farm system, right? You would come out of the terminal world and you would enter into lower level mid-activity facilities, a Manassas Tower, Roanoke, and you would develop and hone your skills and then move up through the terminal world and go to, the Raleigh-Durhams of the world and then onto the JFKs or the Chicagos once you've developed that. That takes a longer path. That's about a 7 to 8 year path, provided we still have funding going through the system, or still have funding where we have a pipeline of controllers through the academy that's actually up and running. When the FAA shut down the academy in 2013 for sequester, they were going to shut it down for 6 months. 2013, March 1st, roughly to October 1st. And they said 6 months, it won't hurt that much, we'll be fine. And then what then happened is we had a 16-day shutdown, which then equated to the FAA not opening the academy until mid-January of 2014. So it was roughly a full year of losing a pipeline of controllers. At the same time, controllers were attriting and retiring out, and we fell so far behind that it is taking a long time to catch up. I think as long as there is stable funding, and this is another reason why I preach this so much, and there's a pipeline through the academy, then you look at, we're probably going to be over the hump in about 2019-20, as long as they continue to hire at the maximum rate. The throughput through the academy is about 1,800 for the year, but just because that's what they have for simulation, that's what they have for seats, and that's all they could do. They can't, I guess they could do a midnight shift, but that would be very problematic on how you would have people training or going through classroom on midnight shifts. So yeah, I think as long as we continue to hire, the agency has met their hiring goal the last 3 years, which has really helped tremendously. The previous 7 years before that, they did not. And we have helped. We have changed some rules during some of these extensions that were passed, that you can hire military controllers and prior experience up to age 35 because they were aged out at 31 because you need 25 years for retirement. We have set up fast tracks for military and previous experience as opposed to making them take a biodata questionnaire. So we've done a lot of things to help them meet their hiring goals. It says something when you have to have Congress pass a law. That's easier than just have HR do something they already can do. And that's how we've been, dealing with our hiring issues, is because we've been passing laws through Congress rather than HR doing what they're supposed to do in the FAA. So, yeah.
Thanks, Paul. We'll start over here, and we'll go to the center.
Hi, my question is regarding what your concerns might be in your controller group as a whole with regards to how technology is pushing us down this road where we're not going to be talking in a verbal sense. And particularly with regard to something as simple as, we've all written an email, right? You write one sentence. He hears it as friendly, he hears it as confrontational, he hears it as a question, he hears it as a statement. Yeah. So we're going to lose that human touch to it, and that's going to be helpful with regard to efficiency, but it's going to hurt us with regards to the intent and the message behind there. I think we can't stop that train, but I'm curious what kind of ideas are out there that maybe help keep some of that around.
It's interesting. You're talking mostly for en route datacom, and I was watching the controllers going through the training at Indianapolis Center, and then I was out at Kansas City Center, and I watched them go through. And the most eerie thing about the whole thing, because there's remote pilots on the other side of the lab, and all you hear is just a clicking of the computer, and there's no clearances being given. And I just was like, there's no talking. And I think within the control room itself, it's going to be a different dynamic. But I think the frequency is always going to be there. If there's intent, you can always clarify, just want to clarify that message. And I think we'll get used to it. I equate it to, I have 2 older children and a very young child right now, but my 24-year-old and my 22-year-old, when I'm traveling around the country, when they were in their teens, I would call them on the telephone and go, how you doing? Good. How was school? Good. What's going on? Nothing. What are you,
Teenagers don't answer
what
the
are you
phone, they just
watching?
send you a
Nothing,
text
right?
back.
But you text them, you can get a whole story from them, right? Hey, blah, 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 and they're going, so maybe generational, you and I don't really, see that as a good thing, but maybe, the millennials are coming in and saying, oh no, that's exactly what we want. That's the way we'll be able to communicate back and forth. So it's just interesting to where you see it. I think it's going to be an eerie dynamic in the en-route environment when it's going to be very quiet. And it's just not a lot of conversation going on. So it'll be interesting to see. And I'm sure in the cockpit it's going to be super quiet too. You're not going to hear the chatter of the pilots back and forth with the controllers. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But the good thing, though, is the frequency's still going to be there. So that's the good thing.
Hello, Paul. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Congratulations on your reelection, first
Thank
of
you.
all. My question for you is, what kind of attrition rates are you looking at right now among the ATC cadre, and what steps are you taking to help pass on that legacy knowledge as the more experienced guys leave and the new developmentals come in?
Yeah. Well, right now, I believe, and the number keeps changing dramatically, and I will say I am included in this number. It's right around 2,500 are eligible to retire out of a roughly 10,500 CPCs in the system. So fully certified controllers. Now we have, because we've been moving controllers from lower level to higher level in the terminal world, we have CPCs, ITs, certified professional controllers in training in facilities, but they're not fully certified at that facility, such as if you went from a 7.3 to a 7.6, you'd be in training, even if you're a certified captain. So we're in that process right now. There's about 2,000 of those in that process. But I think if something dramatic would happen to the retirement system, and the White House has been trying to do that, and OMB has been trying to do that to, eliminate the Social Security supplement that the controllers would get at age 56, to increase our contributions into our retirement system without increasing our annuity. Those type of things would happen. You would see the bulk of that 2,500 go. If that would happen, that would be very problematic for our busy facilities. And like I said earlier, it is the full apprenticeship of actually passing down the knowledge verbally, one controller at a time. And so that's why we need them in there to continue to pass down that information one by one. The one thing I did want to say for sure is, for those that are very familiar with Washington, D.C. and our metro system, they went on a fix-on-fail type of mentality for years because of unpredictable, unstable funding. And many things in the FAA are fix-on-fail right now because of unpredictable and unstable funding, and never do we ever want to be the metro system of the aviation world.
Yeah, for those who don't live and work in D.C. like Paul and I do, and they don't know about the Safe Track program, that's the product of no capital investment in the metro system, where large tracks are shut down for weeks at a time as they finally have decided they've got to repair it. So we have one text message available. We'll do that, and then we'll go to you, sir. Is that okay? Text message question, please.
Yes, sir. Kind of appropriate to end the 2 days, kind of circling back to where we started yesterday morning. There's been talk of removing a pilot or both pilots and having automation have a much more significant role in commercial airlines. For you, Paul, are you concerned about automation taking over air traffic controllers' jobs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when that word next-gen came out, it was couched as self-separating, time-based from gate to gate. Really, the controllers would go into monitoring. And I've actually been very vocal on the Next-Gen Advisory Committee that the more you proceduralize the airspace and the less flexibility you give to the controllers, the more you lose capacity. If we think for some strange reason that proceduralizing the airspace is going to give us VFR rates, it's not going to happen. And just to throw out what the controllers in Atlanta do, 135 on a VFR day, and an IFR day is probably about 85 arrivals, right? So to actually change those separation standards that's a lifetime away. So how do we do that? And the procedure is to take away the flexibility of the controllers to move airplanes is actually decreasing the capacity and the throughput of the airspace and the airport. So I don't see technology taking that away. I think the human in the loop, I think it's a horrible idea to try to go to a one pilot cockpit. I mean, what are you thinking? I mean, it's not like you could pull to the side of the road and fix something. We have a problem. We're in air with one pilot, and something happens like that. That's just, our safety is worth having two pilots, two professional pilots that can fly that airplane. I fly a lot, and I don't think twice about it because I know you guys are the best in the world, and I don't think twice about it. Same thing with the controllers. The human in the loop has to be in, at least until, I know artificial intelligence completely takes over maybe someday, but it's not there yet. And as long as I could see it, with growth, with current equipment, with UAVs and commercial space, we need modern technology to be able to accommodate the system so that we're not gridlocked throughout the whole system. But I don't see it ever taking over the human in the loop of the pilot and the controller. But that could just be because I'm parochial.
No, you're right. Sir.
Congratulations, Paul.
Thank you.
Can you expand or expound on the collaborative working conditions that NACA and the FAA have had over the last few years, some of the benefits, and what might happen if the FAA pulled back and we became less collaborative?
I talked about the titanium stovepipes within the FAA, the HR, LR, finance, and all of them. They're all titanium. And then you have this ATO, which was a really good concept to focus on the operation, except for they have to have those other stovepipes working in direction with them. And all too often, and even NextGen has its own stovepipe, believe it, it's not in the ATO, it's just this own little beast that fits out there that really doesn't know much about the operation. And what our collaboration is, in the simplest terms, is we get involved in all the stovepipes and try to connect them in the FAA. Now, the administrator could do that, but certainly he or she has so much more to do in running this massive agency as opposed to just connecting the loops between these stovepipes. So collaboration has actually helped us facilitate some modernization, some successes. It has saved tremendous amount of money in labor relations and certainly resolving issues through professional standards. And we did it, we copyrighted your program and kind of enhanced it for the controller a little bit. But ATSAP is another one. All of that collaboration together, all that has done is streamline the agency, make it more efficient, help modernize the system, and at the same time enhance the safety of the system. And the proof's in the pudding. I mean, you just look at, you take the 1,500-hour rule, you take ATSAP and the reporting systems that we have there and what we're continuing to work on advancing, we're running at a great rate, and we want that to be the baseline. We never want to go below it. Never want to go below it.
Well, Paul, thanks very much. Paul and I say this all the time. We're out there, especially when we're talking about the dysfunctionality of our government. There are a lot of users of the national airspace, military, commercial, private, UAS, commercial space, but there's only two operators, and that's his members and our members. So, it's one Washingtonian to another, woof, woof. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks very much.
Thank you, bro.